Thanks for tuning in. We're keeping it real and budget friendly, but we're definitely going to have a great chat. Let's jump right in.
Today we are diving deep into one of the oldest engine of human progress, trade. And to explore how trade sharpens nation, we focus on one country that's been trading since the dawn of civilization. Let it be Indus Valley civilization, Harappa civilization. We are basically talking about India. What do you think about it all?
I think it's a fantastic angle, honestly. India's trading history is like this long, fascinating thread that runs through so many centuries. And exploring how that trade really helped shape India's identity is going to be super interesting. So, yeah, let's dive into that and see where it takes us.
So, this is the segment one, the root of trade. Okay, Alt, it's crazy to think that over 3000 years ago, India was already trading with Egypt and Rome. Ports like Lothal in Gujarat were bustling with ships carrying spices, pearls, and cotton. Three things were the trademarks. Like cotton, we are the number one cotton exporter, spices exporter. But pearls was something new because it was based on the sea aspect. Because in India, we don't usually consume non-veg a lot, right? What do you think about it?
Absolutely, and it's wild to think about. I mean, ancient Indian traders were seriously ahead of their time, making these global connections so early on. And like you said, pearls were kind of a fascinating twist because they came from coastal trade, and that added a whole new layer to what India was known for. So it's kind of amazing how all these different trade goods shaped not just India's economy, but its whole cultural identity over time.
So, you know the term, right? Sone ki chidiya. And what do you think about the term that was given to India? Because we were not the gold exporter at that time, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that term. Sone Kichidia, or the Golden Bird, right? It's such a poetic nickname that people gave to India because of its incredible wealth and prosperity in ancient times. Even if India wasn't literally exporting gold everywhere, it was so rich in culture, in resources, and in trade goods that it was basically seen as this land of plenty. So I think it's a pretty fitting term that highlights just how economically vibrant and culturally rich India was considered back then.
So, what is the take on that? Like, how can a country with with so many things to give to the nations worldwide can be limited to certain resources which were not even useful for the common people living in India. You understand? I think like many things like metal, semiconductor factories, and many more new industries which were set up after hundreds of years of civilization in India, thousands, maybe thousands of years of civilization in India. The change in culture. What do you think about the change in culture?
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. It's really fascinating how a country that was once known for these ancient trades and resources has kind of shifted gears over the centuries. I mean, once upon a time it was all about spices and cotton and pearls, and now it's about semiconductors and modern industries. And that cultural shift, I think, is just part of the evolution of any nation. You know, as the world changes, countries adapt. And for India, it's been this journey from being the golden bird of the ancient world to becoming a major player in tech and industry today. So it's kind of cool to see how that cultural transformation just keeps unfolding.
So you think this transition was out of greed to earn more capital or slash money slash legal tender slash anything which a country or a person can barter upon the goods or services they provide. So you think that whole concept of new industrial shift was a greed or just a concept of earning more respect around the nation or around the globe, or just to make us feel more competitive, competent?
Honestly, I think it's more about adaptation and evolving with the times than just pure greed. I mean, every nation naturally wants to especially as the global economy changes. So it's probably a mix of wanting to find new opportunities, earn respect on a global scale, and just keep up with the modern world. It's kind of a natural progression rather than just a pure grab for many. So yeah, it's really about staying capable and keeping up with the changes.
Now, let's talk about the changes. We are going into our second segment, which is given the title, which is the the colonial shift. What is that?
Absolutely. Let's dive into that second segment. So the colonial shift is really all about how colonization changed the whole economic and cultural landscape of India. It's that period where you had the British and other colonial powers coming in and really reshaping trade, industry, and even the priorities of what was produced and exported. So we're going to chat about how that era kind of pivoted India from its old economic identity into something that set the stage for the modern era. Let's get into it.
But that connection changed under colonization, right? The British, the East India Company, which is a big company at the time, which was and big company at that time, flipped the script from the exporter of luxury goods to the supplier of the raw material. You understand? First, they were only selling clothes, linen clothes, and furnitures, and different kind of commodities, gold, silver, diamonds, rare metals, everything. But now they shifted. At that time, they shifted exporting luxury goods to supplying raw material. What's the take on that?
Well, I think you really hit the nail on the head. That shift during colonization was a huge turning point. It basically turned India from this center of craftsmanship and luxury goods into more of a resource base that fed the industrial needs of the colonizers. And that definitely changed the economic dynamics for a long time. So it's a really interesting piece of history and definitely a big part of how India's economic identity evolved.
Um, so, I'm not quoting any country or any kind of person or any super power absorbing person. I'm just gonna ask you a simple question. It's like, was it a British trap for India so that they don't exceed their GDP requirements within the span of 2000 years, in which they controlled, we cannot say ruled or took over, they controlled the most of the economical aspect of the country at that time. Do you think it was a trap set by a British colonial government, not the British of present?
Yeah, I get what you're asking. It's definitely a perspective that a lot of people have looked at historically. I mean, in many ways, colonial policies were definitely designed to keep the colony dependent and to benefit the colonizers economically. So you could say that it was a kind of trap in the sense that it limited India's own economic growth for the benefit of the colonial power. But yeah, it's more about those historical strategies than anything about the present day.
Yeah, uh, now get now we should get into the positive aspect also. They created railway connections. That was that's still in use in India. We had a more privileged education system. We have more good water supplies in certain regions, which was developed under British colonial rule. But all these things shaped our future. Was it for good or was it for just the sake of trading?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really balanced way to look at it. I mean, on one hand, a lot of the infrastructure like railways and certain educational systems that came in under colonial rule did end up becoming a foundation for modern India. It's kind of one of those double-edged swords. Like, yes, those things were built to serve the colonizers' interests at the time, but they did also leave behind a framework that India could use in its own way later on. So I guess in the long run, some of those developments did help shape a more modern nation, even if they weren't originally intended purely for India's benefit. So it's a bit of both, really.
Hmm. So, I mean, the policies which are currently running India right now were structured and framed when British India came to when British colonial rulers came to India to implement certain rules and regulation with respect to the money moving in and out of the country. So, after all these talk, I understood that British India gave us the concept of pure money transfer within the limits of the country's GDP acquired treasure. Matlab, within the limits of the country's buying capacity.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid takeaway. I mean, in a lot of ways, the colonial period did kind of lay down the groundwork for how financial systems and economic policies evolved later on. They introduced certain frameworks around money movement, GDP concepts, and how a country manages its buying capacity and trade. So while it started under colonial rule, India then took those systems and made them its own over time. So it's definitely a mix of legacy and adaptation. It's a really interesting evolution.
So, we will take on the evolution part in our next podcast. Now, let's dive into the third segment, which was named as Post Independence to Liberalization. What? Liberalization. What's your take?
Absolutely. Let's jump right into it. So, this segment, going from post independence to liberalization, is where things get really interesting. It's basically the story of how, after India gained independence, it started out with a more closed economy and then gradually opened up to the world in the 1990s. And that whole liberalization period is where you see a big transformation in terms of trade, foreign investment, and just how India connected with the global economy. So, let's dive in and unpack that journey.
Okay, until 1991, when economy opened up the gates of globalization, the export, IT, pharma, suddenly India was back in business. Basically, we were dead for long. Okay, after the war, say World War II, we took a different route of increasing our exports. You understand? So, you think that we tried our best to become self resilient, but until 1991, the actual economy opened up. So, within the time period of being independent and 1991, we were under major depression. How did we manage the major depression to fall back on its feet and grow again as a developing nation?
Yeah, definitely. So, from independence up until 1991, India was kind of operating in a more closed off economy, trying to be self reliant and build up its own industries. And you're right, there were definitely economic challenges and a kind of slow growth during that period. But once 1991 came around and the economy opened up, yeah, that was a big turning point. It allowed India to step into globalization, boost exports, and really grow industries like IT and pharma. So that whole journey was about hanging on through those tougher years and then taking a big leap once the economy opened up. And that's how India started to find its footing again as a developing and then rapidly developing nation.
So, you think India is a rapidly developing nation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at this point, India is definitely seen as a rapidly developing nation. It's got this huge economy that's growing in a lot of different sectors, and it's really made a name for itself on the global stage. So, yeah, I'd say rapidly developing is a pretty fitting description.
Rapidly developing, you mean by it like new industries being setting up or the existing industries growing even bigger?
Yeah, it's actually a bit of both. When I say rapidly developing, I mean that India's got new industries popping up, like tech startups, green energy, and all kinds of innovation. While at the same time, the more established industries like IT, pharmaceuticals, and manufacturing are also growing bigger and more advanced. So it's that combination of new sectors emerging and existing ones expanding that really makes the economy feel like it's developing pretty rapidly.
Basically, today, trade contributes more than 40% to India's GDP. We are trading over 200 countries. So, does it make a difference in the already existing competition in the trade, like super giant countries like USA, Russia, China, and Japan, South Korea, even being such a comparatively small landlocked country, still they are producing goods which is internationally available. Taiwan and Bangladesh also started exporting clothes on a large scale, and Vietnam being a good exporter of sports goods and different kind of food materials, food articles, uh, and many more countries doing their best. How can India be reformed so that it could compete with international markets, competing with big giants, making it easier for the Indian economy to revive even if it's under depression?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, when you're looking at a global stage with all these big players like the US, China, and even some smaller countries that are doing really well in their niches, it does push India to think about how to stay competitive. And part of that is about continuing to reform, making it easier to do business, investing in infrastructure, and supporting innovation. It's really about finding those areas where India can stand out and making it easier for Indian businesses to thrive on the global market. So it's definitely an ongoing process, but it's all about adapting and finding those competitive edges.
By competitive edges, what do you mean? Can you point out certain pointers for the viewers to understand how the economy impacts the country's backbone without even making it obvious?
Absolutely, yeah, let's break it down a bit. So when we talk about competitive edges, we mean those unique strengths that can really set a country apart. For India, that might mean investing in tech talent,
Mm.
because India's got a huge pool of skilled people in IT and software. We're focusing on renewable energy, where there's a lot of potential. It's also about making it easier for startups and businesses to grow by reducing red tape and improving infrastructure. And all of that kind of works behind the scenes to strengthen the economy's backbone. So even if it's not obvious, those little reforms in focus areas can make a big difference in helping India compete globally.
Hmm. So let's dive into the fourth segment, modern impact.
Absolutely, let's do it. So, our fourth segment, Modern Impact, is really about looking at where all of this leaves India today. We've talked about the history, the shifts, the opening up of the economy, and now it's about how all those pieces come together in the modern day. We can dive into how India's trade and economy are impacting people's lives, how it's positioning itself globally, and what the future might look like. So, let's jump into that modern impact and see where it takes us.
From textile in Surat to tech in Bangalore, trade fuels, livelihood, and innovations. After all that thing, GDP is nothing more, it's about growth with a global identity. So, we need to make a global identity of our own country's biggest, like, matlab, we can make an identity out of the biggest ideas that we carry in our heads. Basically, everyone has an idea of their improved future. India also needs improved ideas to improve its infrastructural GDP growth, right? Infrastructure is main, because if you cannot build a office out of the money, you cannot build a fortune out of that money. Same thing, right? So, what is the take on it? Like, how can India be impacting other nations with this kind of startup ideas, like focusing on infrastructure first, then investing on the goods, then investing on the digital money, then investing on the research projects, basically. So these chain movements are not differentiating us from other countries, right? We are still in the race, but we are not feeling the competitive nature of the race. So where are we lacking, or where is the international market lacking? Basically, we cannot complain about our own ecosystem, right? We have to understand the ecosystem within the country of different origins, right? Basically, uh, every country has different origin of communities, right? We have Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Sikh, and Jews, many more small or big religious groups or tribal groups trying to achieve their global identities. How can the idea of being more impactful in the international market can help us us humans living in India as of now to attain their own identity all around the world and making a name for themselves and their country as well. But how can we impact, basically? Impact is the term of this segment. So how can we how can we how can we be more impactful with the resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's all about leveraging those resources in a way that really highlights India's strengths on the global stage. And like you said, it's about infrastructure, it's about innovation, it's about supporting diverse communities and all their ideas. So to be more impactful, it's really about creating an environment where all these different talents and ideas can thrive. And that means focusing on education, on encouraging entrepreneurship, on making it easier for people to bring their ideas to life, and then showcasing that on an international level. So the more India can create that kind of supportive ecosystem, the more people can make a name for themselves and for the country. It all ties back to building that global identity.
So all of the talks and all of the important points that might have influenced some of you, after all these things, Indian Prime Minister had an aim of Indian economy status. Like, he wants us to be a $5 trillion economy uh, within 2027, 26, 27 maybe. But is that an actual target?
Yeah, that's a great question and a really big goal. I mean, the idea of aiming for a $5 trillion economy is definitely ambitious, but it's also a way to set a kind of North Star for where the country wants to go. And whether or not it's perfectly hit by that exact year, the idea is to drive growth, encourage reforms, and keep pushing the economy forward. So it's definitely a real target in the sense that it's a vision, and it gives everyone something to work towards as the country keeps growing.
Let's get to a different topic for a while. Country not being in India, basically, even if underdeveloped countries and the countries that have started within the ratio of 20 to 30 years, how can they improve their economy with the help of already developed or the developing countries? Like, if the country is developed, it can help the developing countries, but it cannot directly implicate its rule on the countries that are underdeveloped and still on the verge of developing. So I think, like, the developing countries should uh, tie up projects with the countries with lower GDP than them, lower buying capacity than them, making it easier for the developing country and the underdeveloped countries to rise at the same pace, and making industrialization and civilization a better place for interaction of the trade warfare or the trade welfare.
Yeah, I think you're really onto something there. It's kind of about creating a more cooperative global ecosystem where where developing countries can partner with underdeveloped ones and help lift each other up. It's not about imposing rules, but more about collaboration and sharing knowledge, technology, and investments in a way that benefits everyone. So, if a developing country can help an underdeveloped country build infrastructure or improve education, that can raise both up in the long run and creates a kind of network where trade becomes more about mutual growth and shared progress rather than just competition. So, yeah, it's all about that collaborative approach.
So I think like we should close this podcast on this note. I want to say that so the trade is more than economy, right? Economics. Trade is more than economics. It's how a nation tell its story to the world.
Absolutely, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. Trade really is a way of telling a nation's story, showing what it has to offer, and how it connects with the world. So thanks for having this conversation. I think we've covered a lot of ground and hopefully given everyone a lot to think about. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Catch you in the next podcast, bro. Bye.
Absolutely. Catch you in the next one. Thanks for the great chat, and take care. Bye for now.
करेंगे